the United States right now, the Republicans and the Democrats are blaming one another. It's a full informational war, a media war against Russia. No matter what President Biden does or any Republican does, they blame one another for not being, quote unquote, tough enough on Russia. But the truth is, objectively, they've dug themselves into a crisis because there is a certain dependency on gas and oil reserves from Russia. They've gone as far as to reach out to Nicolás Maduro and the PSUV anti-imperialist leadership in Caracas, in Venezuela. They floated the idea of new rounds of talks with Iran. They're trying to employ the old colonial tactic of divide and conquer. But the seasoned anti-imperialist leadership in Caracas is going to know how to deal with the situation. In Venezuela, any oppressed, blockaded country has every right in the international scene to have economic relations with any major power to alleviate the suffering of this blockade that's existed since the time of Barack Obama in 2014. So everything has changed in the past 12 days since the Russian intervention in Ukraine. And the reaction out of Washington is surprising. It's a very dynamic situation right now.
Mm-hmm. Moving back to you, Thomas. Now, we have two major economies in the EU, France and Germany, and they have openly said that Russian oil and gas is too important. But that also seems to contradict the EU Commission, who wants to reduce dependence on Russian oil. What do you think the outcome of the discussions between these states and the EU Commission will be?
Well, I can't look in the future. The problem is if the Germans seem to be more realistic, because the Germans know that without Russian gas, they have to switch off light. There will not be enough electricity even for living. And I'm not talking about the economy, and I'm not talking about prices then. We really have to understand that, from my point of view, in Brussels, we have people who are just fighting for ideology, which is transatlantic, and there's no realistic view on the situation there. Because whatever you want to do, it's simple. We have a limited gas on Earth, and whether you can change it or not, there is no way. And well, I don't know what they will agree on, and maybe Russia will make the decision for them, as we heard yesterday from the prime minister in Russia. Maybe Russia starts to switch off gas because Russia is fed up with these sanctions. I don't know. Maybe Russia will make the decision. Who knows?
Yeah, we're certainly seeing the fallout from this conflict on many different levels. And now moving back to you, Daniel, we've seen crop prices rise, as Russia and Ukraine have a big chunk of this market. Nickel and aluminium too, titanium, palladium for the aerospace industry. What do you think the global impact this will be on resources in general?
Well, the Russian leadership has been calculating since 2014 or since 2000 when Putin came into power. They've calculated very carefully to what extent they can sustain an embargo and sanctions. It's been round after round of sanctions against the Russian people. And that's, of course, the tragic thing about blockades. They affect the everyday families the most. The Russians have calculated carefully that this moment 12 days ago with Russian troops entering into Ukraine, this represents arguably the historic watershed moment, the emerging of a multipolar world. And in the economic sense, the Russians have calculated that they can do this. They can sustain these embargoes, and it's the West, it's Germany, it's England, it's the US that's going to be scampering to try to make up for this. So I think all parties are affected, but Russia increasingly can pivot towards China, towards Iran, towards this pluripolar world. And it's only because we're in 2022 and not 2014 or 2000, 2001 or 1991 that the Russians could make this gamble, which so far they seem very confident in.
Mm-hmm. I'm afraid that's all we have time for, gentlemen. I'd like to thank you both for your time today on RT International. So, author and journalist Thomas Roper and Daniel Shaw, Professor of Latin American and Caribbean Studies. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Russia has long been an established producer